Jeff, you started with a poll. I'm going to have to reciprocate. How many of you eat at McDonald's? Oh, come on. Data tells us it's different. I'm part of our enterprise strategy team. Prior to this role, I was a worldwide leader at McDonald's Corporation. And we use our backgrounds, lessons we learned from you, our customers, and lessons from Amazon to help accelerate your transformations. And what I find fascinating is we believe we're at a tipping point in history. That may sound a bit fantastical, a bit hyperbolic, but what would happen if you could free yourself of constraints? That happened in 1996 when Amazon.com launched and started selling books. It happened in 2006 with AWS introducing the cloud that enables us all to innovate faster. What would happen if you could free yourself from boundaries? We're launching 3,200 low Earth orbit satellites to connect even the remotest areas of the world. What happens if there's no imagination limits that you have? What happens if you could reimagine a dress, a house, a financial product, your organization? These are the promises of technology and specifically of generative AI. It's captured the imagination of everyone globally in such a short period of time. It's accelerating gains in productivity in organizations. It's bringing people who didn't consider themselves builders to the table and letting them reimagine their own organization and their own role. But these times of great change often take the form of stories. These stories talk of new technologies replacing human beings. They talk of new upstart organizations replacing incumbent organizations. They also talk about old skills being replaced by new skills and us paying a premium for them because they're so scarce. New ways of working that appear to drive unbelievable gains in productivity. They bring headlines in the media that proclaim both fear and excitement about what this technology can do. These fears are often misplaced. A combination of new skills, new ways of working, new imagination enable us all to prosper. You know this from your own journeys to the cloud. And we're there again. We're at a point where technology can truly change the world. But this is not just a recent story. This is the story of the Industrial Revolution, of electrification. New ways of operating, new technologies, new ways of leading saw productivity fueled in a way that no one could imagine 100 years ago. The introduction of the steam engine. Was anyone around? Introduction of the steam engine? No. But the introduction of the steam engine is still rated as one of the biggest boosts to human productivity ever seen. It removed the drudgery of transportation, extended the distances we could travel, boosted productivity across the nation. We're at another tipping point. We've seen a growth in technology over the past 20 years, which is unbelievable. We believe this is another revolution. We have the technology to unleash opportunities now, not just in our own businesses, but also, as Jeff alluded to, in society as well. This is going to be like the Industrial Revolution, removing undifferentiated heavy lifting to enable the people we have, including ourselves, to really free up our imagination to do some incredible things in society. So welcome to Generation AI. It's a generation born from the availability of compute, incredible amounts of data, and advances in statistics and mathematics. It's raising the bar on innovation and expectations. It's enabling us to start to dream the impossible, those insurmountable problems which we can now start to address. In just 18 months, generative AI has gone from almost nothing to capturing everyone's imagination across the world. Jeff talked about this. Part of the study he mentioned showed that 107 billion pounds in the UK through to 2030 is simply going to be generated from machine learning, AI, and generative AI. But enabling this opportunity as he touched on, is going to require new skills, but it's also going to require a new form of leadership to navigate this opportunity. And there's many factors driving this. There's profound changes in how we work, how we live, how we participate in society. Every aspect of society and industries can be reimagined, even what it means to be human. And it's not just about efficiencies, it's also about how do we make some profound impact across the world? How do we help regenerate the planet? These changes are driven by many things. One is technology, and it's not just AI, it's high-performance compute. It's connectivity, IoT, and in the not-too-distant future, it's going to be quantum as well. These technologies are impacting every economy, every industry, every job. These technologies are emerging at a rate that is exponentially faster than anything we've seen before, fueling innovation. But customers are also changing. They're demanding we keep up with their demands. We talk about personalization in retail. They want more than personalization now. That's green fees. They want an intimacy that we can only achieve with a combination of human ingenuity and machine learning. They also have higher expectations of us as businesses to not just follow trends, but to actually lead the way when it comes to environmental consciousness. But these changes go beyond even just our customers. We're all under financial pressure. It's forcing us to rethink our time horizons, not just investing in the short term, but freeing up money today to invest in our future. For instance, British Telecoms, in just 4 months, generated 100,000 lines of code and freed up 12% of their software engineers' time to invest their time in things which made a difference to the company. Speed matters more than ever in today's world. This time can be invested in new products, new services, new business opportunities. This is the story of many companies, including McDonald's, driving new digital engagement opportunities, adapting to uncertainty in the environment in which we operated. But to adapt to this rate of change, we actually need to change how we operate. And this isn't new. Every century or so, we go through a profound change in how work gets done. But often, it's hard to internalize that because we've all been brought up with a certain way of structuring and running our organizations. But the truth is, the true power of this technology cannot be unleashed unless we adapt the ways of operating our organizations. It's the lessons we take from many tipping points in history. The steam engine, fantastic invention, but it was only when we reinvented factories, for instance, that we saw this massive improvement in productivity. And I know this word unprecedented can be overused, but these are unprecedented times. Modern organizational structures, new ways of leading, new ways of thinking about human resources are coming to the fore in many organizations. And I'm proud that Amazon has led the way in many of these areas in the way we lead our own organization. These changes are important. If we just have the fancy new technology, but without changing the ways we work, it's like driving a Formula One car on a dirt track. If we change how we work with old technology, it's like driving a Morris saloon on a Formula One track. It'll work, but it's going to be a pretty unpleasant experience. You can make the magic happen here. We're at the beginning of a change. We're unable to see where this is going to take us. But it's contingent on us to make a decision. Are we going to drive, or are we going to be a passenger on this journey? And even this isn't new. Leadership has been through many transitions. From the great man theory in the 19th century, where it was assumed leaders were actually born as leaders, through to things like situational leadership. But all of these assumed the leader had all of the answers, and we know that's no longer true. Today's leaders are different. They've embraced the cloud to manage challenges such as cost, reliability, security, scalability. But they've also increased their organization's tempo to be able to address the demands for innovation. We've seen this with 100,000 customers using machine learning on AWS today. And this is where you come in. So while it's not possible to predict where technology is going, we have a fair idea of where leadership is going. Here's what we believe we're going to see in leaders. They're going to imagine a new future. They're going to take the constraints off the way they look at the world. They're going to imagine a different future they could create for their organization and employees. They're going to explore these opportunities, experiments, but then they're going to create pathways to be able to scale these opportunities massively and get them into the hands of every citizen and customer they touch. They take these constraints off their imagination, challenging their own assumptions and the status quo, and they exhibit a passion for the unknown and for exploring a better future. But they're also humble. I meet some incredible leaders, and you would not believe they're CEOs because they're incredibly humble. They're inquisitive. They understand that status and experience doesn't mean they have all of the answers. They go out there beyond their industry and areas of expertise and actively want to learn about what's possible. They know that ambiguity and uncertainty are precursors to invention. They approach the world with curiosity, a belief there is a better way, and they demonstrate a willingness to unlearn habits of the past. And they seek out new sources of inspiration. Imagination requires inspiration, though. Changes to deeply rooted habits, as I'm sure many of you know from your own careers, can be deeply uncomfortable. And these leaders do something that the data tells us we are incredibly bad at doing. They tell a story that excites their employees, that is bigger than just a job, that paints this picture of what's in it for me as an employee. Beyond that, though, I'd try this experiment in your own workplace. Pick 10 people. Ask them, what are your priorities as a business, and what's your purpose? Data tells us, unfortunately, you may be unpleasantly surprised by the answer. If we can't get people moving in the same direction, no wonder we have challenges moving quickly in organizations. So leaders address this by aligning everyone around a story, which they tell again and again and again. They answer the question, what's in it for me, for the employees? And they help them develop the skills necessary to succeed. Modern leaders also embrace their inner teenagers. I'm sure many of you have teenagers, always very inquisitive, don't want to be left behind, want to be up there with the latest technology. That's what we need to be as leaders. We need to be those children who ask the incessant questions about why, rather than assume we know the answers. You as leaders don't need to be experts in HR or finance, but you need to know the basics. The same is true with technology. Generative AI is finding its way into every aspect of work life, whether you've embraced it officially or not. And in fact, it's one of the top 3 priorities now for leaders as a technology. This is an incredibly exciting time. Executives inside and outside of technology, though, need to show an interest and a willingness in the technology. The data tells us that we're making progress there, but still less than 25% of the C-suite have enough technology knowledge to do their job. Not to do your job as CIOs or CTOs, but to do their job. We have an obligation to help them on that journey and give them the knowledge they need to succeed. Creating an environment of constant learning is going to be a competitive necessity for us all. We all need new skills, but who's going to give your employees the skills they need? Is it you, or is it the next employer? So if you don't train your people, who will? Jeff talked about this, and it's a common story across Europe, in fact, across the world. Quantifiably, skills is the biggest single gap we have to realizing some of these dreams. Not just our employees' skills, but our skills as leaders too. We've got many programs out there, many of them are free, to help you as executives, but also your teams embrace this. The QR code will take you to some of these. But I'd encourage you to take advantage of these and also use our partners to jumpstart some of your transformations and skills acquisitions as well. As organizations develop these skills, we'll meet you where you are. Over 10,000 customers today, for instance, are using Bedrock. If you have a technical mindset, it's a great way of getting started with access to a raft of foundation models. Companies like Booking.com, Lonely Planet, Accor are using this not just for efficiencies, but to actually reinvent their customer experiences. If you're a little bit less technically minded, I'd encourage you to play with Party Rock. It gives you the same access to the underlying technology, but in a fun way, where you can start creating your own applications and really get hands-on with this technology. As one CIO told me recently, if you're a CEO and you haven't tried prompt engineering, try it. Get your hands dirty. Inspiring and understanding is a good first step, but it's only the first step. Explorers of old, whether you're Michael Faraday or Leonardo da Vinci, they all approached the world with this curious, open mind. And I'm sure many of you face the doubters out there and the cynics. Have you heard those phrases? It's never going to work. Tried it before, doesn't work here. It's not how we do things. We have a principle that we're willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time as we invent the future. We need to be thinking about change beyond just our tenure. In the face of these doubters, we need to be explorers. We need to be the modern-day Indiana Jones of the business environment. Sort of knowing where the treasure is, not knowing what the path is to get there, but confidently hacking your way through the jungle, adapting your path as you go to get there. These leaders we work with, they seek clarity of outcome, but they're confident that they don't actually know everything they need to know to achieve their outcome. So they experiment their way there. They're willing to change their mind and pivot as they find new information. The greatest breakthroughs in history have happened this way. I take inspiration from one such leader, a gentleman by the name of John Snow. In the 1800s, it was assumed cholera was spread as an airborne disease. It's a reason we ended up with a global pandemic. But there was one individual, a physician and a leader in his own right, John Snow, who had the backbone to look for new data. He plotted outbreaks of cholera around London and traced it back to a single well. From that today, we have advances in global sanitation and public health policy globally. One individual made that difference. But this isn't just about the leader as an individual. Future leaders create an environment where everyone can thrive. One recent survey showed that 80% of companies that focused on culture as a core part of their transformation saw sustained business results 3 years or more after. Of the organizations that didn't, 0 saw sustained performance. Leaders do this by creating an environment where employees feel they can be creative, they can be valued. They recognize that to drive modern-day exploration, you need to deliberately break down silos. It's one of the things we practice internally. For many of you familiar with Amazon, you know we work in these 2 pizza teams. Teams of 8 to 12 people focused on an outcome, supported by the leader, and allowed to experiment their way to success. These leaders encourage these teams to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. They dive into the data and customer anecdotes to find out, are they addressing the root cause or a symptom? They explore hypotheses, and the great thing about hypotheses is they may be wrong, so they're prepared to change their direction, depending on the outcome of that exploration. And we're proud, if you haven't worked with them, we have digital innovation teams and our executive visioning teams who've helped thousands of customers embrace some of these concepts in their own organization. These leaders are also willing to take tough decisions faster. 2/3 of leaders say that decisions have become more complex. For those here last year, you'll recall that we showed data that says the rate of disruption currently is 50 times greater than it was 5 years ago. Often, though, we seek more data for that certainty of the right decision. But instead, the modern-day leader adopts a mindset of experimentation at scale. They make decisions even when they don't have all of the data they wish they had, but are prepared to change their mind. They prioritize action over paralysis, reducing the cost of experimentation using technologies like the cloud. They're also really good at something us humans are really bad at, which is stopping stuff, making space for things that really matter to the organization, shutting down experiments or initiatives which are not going anywhere. This is the story of the cloud. Over 220 services that enable you to experiment, enables you to focus on the things that are important to your business, not the undifferentiated heavy lifting. As an example, a customer of ours, Intuit, they're a global financial technology company, 100 million customers. Every day, they're creating 65 million machine learning predictions every single day. So exploring new ideas is great, but at the end of the day, you want to be able to scale these ideas massively if you're going to have a significant impact on your business. How many of you have got to the end of a 5-year SAP implementation and said, oh my God, my project plan and budget were right? No one? Surprised. Oh, yeah. And yet, we still do that. We still put together project plans even though we know they won't work. So today's leaders continuously deliver value. They don't go to the CFO and say, give me £10 million, and I promise you, boss, you'll get a return in 3 years. This needs leaders who are able to fire up their entire organization. You want leaders who set clear direction, are cheerleaders for their organization, clear obstacles for their employees, continue to reiterate why this is important for their business. These leaders are scaling innovations across every industry. SRAM, for instance, who make parts for bicycles, are able to do that in a way that they're twice as strong and 20% lighter at a lower cost. The Allen Institute excites me. They're doing the first full mapping of the human brain and are going to use machine learning and generative AI to help form inferences around some of the world's most deadliest diseases. And then companies like Magellan TV, who have thousands of English series, are using Bedrock to not just translate them, but also get the idioms and context right and the timing correct as well. All of these, and many of you, also dream big. We believe dreaming small, if there's such a thing, is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have to think big, even if you don't know how you're going to get there. The world is changing too fast to think small. Generation AI leaders are prepared to dream the impossible and figure out how to make it a reality. And it's about doing all of this cost-effectively, securely, at scale. Out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people are using Bedrock at the moment? So more people than eat at McDonald's. Sure. It's great to see. But this is a significant part of the value, this idea that we're seeing such an evolution in foundation models. And you'll hear from Anthropic later with their incredible Claude series of LLMs. You don't need to bet on red. You have access here to a vast number of models. We don't believe there is going to be one model that you'll use in your organization over the long term. I'm a passionate technologist. I've been a technologist all of my life. I truly believe we have the technology to do some absolutely amazing things. We can solve some of the world's most intractable problems. But I also believe this needs a change in leadership at scale. Many of us are still running organizational charts, which were brilliant in the 1850s. How do we rethink our organizations? This is a different world to the one most of us grew up in. So how do we lead here? But we have the power to change this. We have the power to create generation AI. I started today by talking about the tipping point we're living through, a tipping point that's going to define changes to society, to how we live, how we work, and the such like. So picking the right technology and having the right ways of working, hopefully is going to enable us to be more like Formula One in our organizations rather than the Morris on the Formula One track. Our call to action is simple, but it requires us all to rethink how we drive these changes. I truly believe we have it in our power to lead differently in our organizations. We don't pretend, as Charlie touched on, that these habits are going to be easy to overcome, but these are incredibly exciting times. Thank you.